Hello, my name is Artur Klesun and I am the author of the deep-assoc-completion PHP Storm plugin. In this video I'm gonna show you how do the features of this plugin work. First, some briefing. The deep-assoc-completion is the plugin that adds the typing for associative arrays in PHP Storm. Like when you declare a variable which is an associative array, the plugin will remember the type of the keys of this associative array, and when you use this variable later, it will suggest you the keys that are stored there. Okay, let's head right into the first example. Here you see we are declaring a variable with some keys, and here on the next line we are using this variable. And when we try to get a key from this variable, when we hit Control Space, or just when we type the quotes, the plugin suggests you the three keys that we declared above. And you see there is a key name, its value, its type. All this valuable information gets passed to us from the plugin. That's what it basically does in a very simplified form. You can hit enter and it completes the key, and you can control click on this keys and it moves your caret to the place where this key was defined. It can be defined 100 lines above or even in another file, even in some file in a vendor directory, like in some libraries that you include in your project. The plugin is smart as hell. Okay, this example is not so interesting, since we are getting completion here for the variable we defined just one line above. Like, we don't actually need the completion here since we see the names. We just need to raise our eyes a few degrees above. But what if we have a bit more complex example, right? Here it's still a pretty simple example, but it's already not so obvious what keys do we have in this variable. Like, we have this variable here, alright, which holds the value returned by this function, and what this function returns depends on what this function returns, and we also do array pop, taking an element from the array returned by this function. Knowing all that is not as easy task as in the previous example, so remembering what function returns what keys most likely is not possible for a human brain in a project with like hundreds or thousands of functions. But it is possible for a machine, since machine can perform quadrillions of computations per second, and it does when you have this plugin installed. A little notice here: the plugin understands most, if not all, built-in PHP functions like array pop, array map, array filter, array reduce, and it understands all the functions and methods you define yourself, or methods defined in a library you use, given that this library source code is available in your project, which is usually the case with PHP. Okay, this example is, well, it's still doable to work with this associative array by remembering what keys go where. But if you want a deeper example, look at this. You see, we have like 10 or something like that keys in a row taken from an array, and the plugin knows them all. And you can Control B on every of them, Control B or Control click. The plugin can do much more complex stuff than you see here. It's not even a half of the depth limit of the plugin, and all these functions may be scattered all across your project. They don't have to be in a single file to work. Okay, let's move to the next example, I guess. Sorry for being boring. Now, this works for the data we create ourselves, but how do we get the type of incoming data working? For that case, the plugin allows you to specify the keys in a PHP doc with such format. The part after the equals sign in the doc should be a valid PHP expression. Note that the value in the doc does not necessarily have to be an array. It can be any expression, like, for example, a function call, or, well, anything else. It may be an array of objects. Magic. That's how you document the keys in function argument. and you get the nice completion here. Note that it works not just inside the function, but also when you call this function. Here it's the function promote that takes the employee with such keys, and when we call this function, the plugin suggests you the completion with these keys. You may notice here is an empty string in the completion options. That's because of this line. The plugin is so smart that it not just looks in the documented keys, but it also looks at how this variable gets used and also determines the type info based on that. Like if I had something to do with key name last name, for example, in this function, then I would get the completion here as well. Just a small nice thing about the plugin. Remember how I said that the value in the PHP doc does not necessarily have to be an array, like it can be a function call. Well, here is more practical example. Here we have a promotion variable and we type just the function name in the PHP doc that returns as so-called promotion object, associative array. Let's call it record maybe. Anyhow, we get the completion by specifying that the type of promotion is what the function promote returns. We tell the plugin where to look these keys from, and that is the coolest feature there is in the plugin. One of the coolest features. I used this stuff a lot and it makes coding really comfortable, giving you both a very complete typing and, like you can see here, it has zero verbosity. You define these keys just once, just in the function where you create them, and you can reuse this function anywhere you have an argument having this type. Yeah, and this also works with method calls as well, not just script functions. Like here we have an employee again, but this time it's employee for the method getEmployee rather than the employee we document in previous example, and it also works. A side note, since in this particular case the method is located in the same class, we could write it like that, and the completion will still work using self instead the class name. Or we could type static. Static will have a special meaning. Well, like in normal code, it will be aware of the extending classes if you type it static in the function name. May be useful if you're like using some abstract or model classes where you override some function. So another thing about this stuff is that you can either specify here just the class name. In such case, if you have multiple classes with same name in your project, you will get the completion from all of them in such case. And if you want to limit the type to a particular class with such name, you can use a fully qualified name with namespace in. By the way, when you're typing the method here, when you type the class name, you can see the plugin suggests the completion. Very convenient. A bit more about the doc commands. Since the format accepts any valid PHP expression, you can also write it this way. And then the plugin will know that the variable is an array of employees. By employees, I mean the output of function getEmployee, this function. You can also write this way. If you have a function that returns an array, but you want to specify that the parameter is of type matching the element in such array, you can type it this way and it will work. I hope it's interesting for you so far. Okay, this was more like of boring stuff about the documenting and all. Now we are getting to a real thing, which I refer to as a usage-based completion. Before, as you could see, up until now we were working with variables that already were created beforehand. But what if we want completion when we are creating an array? Like you see here, we call a function and we pass an associative array to this function. And what if we want to get completion here? I'll tell you what, you hit Control Space and you get it. You get the completion. The plugin looks into this makes-up payload function, sees this params parameter. It sees that we are querying keys products, currency and amount from this parameter, and so the plugin knows that these keys must be supplied in what you pass to this function. The same works with, as you could see earlier, with documented keys on a parameter. Like here you can see it suggests, for example, full name, because we included it in the description of this parameter. That itself is not so interesting. The interesting stuff is that this usage-based completion not only works with arrays, but it also works with functions. Like here, one of my favorite examples of the features of my plugin. Here you see we have a function called isOld, and it takes an argument. Notice that there are no any type hints around this argument, and yet the plugin knows the type of this argument. Why do you think it does? I'll tell you why. Because we are using this function in other place in this file, and the plugin sees that what gets passed to this function is an element from the PCC records variable, which holds an array of associative array having the GDS, PCC and the year keys. So the plugin knows that there are these three keys in this PCC rec argument in the function, small function. Do you get how awesome this is? You don't have to keep everything in monstrous 100 lines long code block or have quadrillion documents on every function to keep the track of value types. You can freely split your code to however many internal functions you wish, and every one of them will know what the type its argument will be based on what you pass to this internal function. By internal function, I mean the function that is defined in a class and gets used inside this same class. Usually these functions are private. Local functions, not internal. And that is the stuff that even the most smartest statically typed languages like TypeScript are not capable of doing. Defining a function and having the compiler know the type of its argument without explicitly specifying them. And the last thing for today, another one small nice feature, not so cool as local function argument inference, but still pretty useful stuff, is string value completion. I don't know how about you, but I often got into situations while writing PHP code that I had some kind of data that may mean different things based on some keyword constant that it holds. For example, here we have some sort of lexem variable holds some keys, one of which is the key named kind. And as you can see from the implementation, the kind is a constant. Depending on the value of this constant, the meaning of this record will be different. Usually, when you're processing an array of such records, you would write a long if-else-if chain to process different kinds of records differently. And the plugin suggests you the values that this string may have when you're pressing Ctrl space in the string literal. As you can see here, it suggests both plain strings as well as constants. And same works when you are passing this string to a function. Like here we have function named evaluate lexem, and since it's written here that what it takes is an associative array which matches the value returned by the parse lexem function, the plugin knows that this lexem parameter must have keys, kind, context and attributes, and when you type the kind field you get completion of what values does this kind field can be. Yeah, and goto works as well. An important fact, like hoba and hoba. Okay, I know what you're currently thinking. You wanna know how to turn this stuff on, right? When you just open the PHP Storm, this smartass typing doesn't work from out of the box. You'll need to install the plugin first. So in order to do that, you open File, Settings, switch from Installed tab to Marketplace, type deep-assoc-completion, and here you will have the green install button. You hit it and restart the PHP Storm, and after that you should have the completion, like such completion, with a nice bluish icon. Okay, that's it for this video. There are much more features in this plugin, much more specific features like completion from SQL selects, from database schema if you have database configured. It has support for Psalm and Han PHP documenting formats, and many more things. I'll provide a link to the page that describes them in detail. So that's it, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it, your feedback is much appreciated. So if you have some sort of bug report or feature request, you're welcome to leave it out in the issues page on the GitHub. Короче, goodbye.